just curious.
All right, welcome to the workshop of the APC regarding the ordinance in the Town Council Long Beach, generally known as the Lake Michigan Shoreline Preservation Overlay District, the amendments to that. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so I want to thank everybody for the comments. We received multiple comments about this ordinance, and I think everybody on the APC has had a chance to look at them all, although I think there may be one new one here that I just read through. We're going to go through this kind of one section at a time and have comments on those sections as they come up. So if you can limit your comments to the sections that we're discussing, I would appreciate it. Let's limit the comments to 2 minutes in the interest of time. If we can keep them constructive, that would be great. In other words, if you could help us with this ordinance. Negative comments aren't going to help us. We saw plenty of those and we brought them all. So that those comments probably don't need to be repeated. We noted them all and the arguments that were made. The point of this ordinance was to try and protect the use and the beach in Long Beach. The use and the beach. That was the idea of it. So with that, nobody needs to repeat anything about divisiveness in Long Beach. We heard you loud and clear. Repeating those tonight isn't going to help. We don't need to hear about how part-time owners somehow should get preferential treatment because they're part-time owners and use less services. We heard that. We don't necessarily agree with it, but we heard it. At least I don't necessarily agree with it. Also, I don't need to hear any more about how people on the lakefront pay more taxes than the rest of us. We heard that. Noted. So let's start with the first section. That's.
Could you use your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. First section is Chapter 154, Section 154.206 shall be added and read as follows. This is regarding stairs onto the public trust. Property owners are prohibited from constructing permanent chairs over existing seawalls if stairs project onto or otherwise touch the public trust property. However, retractable ladders shall be permissible to the extent otherwise permissible under the law, provided that any such ladder does not extend more than 3 feet from the base of the existing seawall. Existing non-conforming but permitted stairs shall not be repaired or replaced. Any such stairs in a state of disrepair or have otherwise exceeded their useful life shall be removed within 30 days of receiving written notice from the building inspector to do so. Notwithstanding the foregoing provisions, let's just do that one. Let's stop there because then we'll move on to the stairs over the seawall section. So the point of this was that stairs coming off of seawalls, basically a number of them anyway. Frank, I don't know if any of them have ever been permitted by either the town, by the DNR, or the Army Corps of Engineers. So they were all built, as far as I can tell, without permits. A number of these stairs extend straight off the seawall. I can think of one stairs between stop 22 and 23 that extend on a calm day 3/4 of the way to the water. So the ability of people to traverse the beach is severely limited, and on a rough day is just dangerous. They're metal stairs, just not good. The other problem with stairs, of course, is that on days that are wavy, particularly wooden stairs, get all beat up, get knocked down. We get debris deposited on the public trust property, pieces of lumber with nails sticking out. We had a situation like that between 22 and 23 also. I'm familiar with that stop because that's where I go. And it sat there for most of the summer. Finally, the town took care of it. It was a public health issue. Somebody was going to get hurt. It was partly on public trust property, partly on private property. The homeowners weren't home and really haven't been home all summer, so we took care of it. So that's basically the background as to why we felt this was the case, why these stairs are a hazard. Now, personally, if somebody wants, my personal opinion, I'm just speaking for myself, maybe we need to consider something like, okay, you want to put stairs off your seawall, maybe you build a platform, and then your stairs come down parallel to the seawall, and maybe it doesn't extend more than 3 feet out. But I'm concerned about people impinging on the ability of people to basically traverse the public trust property. That wouldn't take care of the problem with stairs getting smashed up on a rough day. So comments about that, I'll entertain now from the public. Start with
would that be in reference only to those lots with seawalls?
this part is just on seawalls, yes.
Get people to state their names.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Good.
John Mangle, 1508 Lakeshore Drive.
You know what, and can I, when you talk, can I have you go over here? That way they can put you on film. Unless you don't want to be on film. Other comments? You just step over. Yeah, it's probably what the best way to do it is.
Hi, Mary O'Neill, 1532 Lakeshore Drive. I believe it was sent in writing, but I thought it might be good to have on record and for people to hear. These were comments from Michael Knight.
Yeah, Mary, we've read those. And
Well, I know, but I don't know if everybody else has.
Well, but the point is the folks up here are the ones who are going to write the ordinance. So these are the people who you really need to influence. But to repeat everything again, I don't think we need to do that.
If you're taking into account riparian rights and all the things that weren't addressed.
We read everything he wrote.
Okay.
And noted.
I just feel badly that not everybody made it.
And we will be discussing it with the town attorney. Because basically the plan here is we're going to take your comments tonight, take those back to our town attorney, and we'll come up with a draft ordinance that will be published a week from today or the day after, and then we'll come back to the APC 2 weeks from tonight. So that's the game plan. Okay.
Wouldn't it be a good idea to have this read for the record? You're recording this meeting.
Could you state your name?
Jane Ford, 1600.
The point is, this is a workshop, okay? The idea is to help us to write this ordinance. So we've noted the comments. We don't need repetition. All those comments will be on the record, right, Nick?
Yeah,
We've got those? We've got copies of them all. They're on the
They
record.
are available. They'll be available in the clerk's office if you would like to see.
And we're going to post them
You
online.
just have to fill out.
And we'll put them on the
Yeah,
website.
quickly, because that's, a lot of times that's the problem, the timeliness of things on the...
We had issues posting them on the shoreline protection.
Yeah, they'll be up by tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So- Yeah, so other comments that we haven't received already? Anybody have any other comments?
Tom King,
If you
2301.
go over here, Tom, just like,
Why don't you step on this?
oh. You know what, let's make an exception for Tom. He's kind of late up, okay. He's not moving so well.
2301 Florida. Just a couple of questions. One, what authority does the town have to issue any permit on property that the permittee does not own, or does the town?
Well, and that's the issue we need to take up with our attorney, because we
To
have,
the extent that it is public trust property, in no way can anybody improve or otherwise occupy that property to the exclusion of the public. So how will we reconcile that?
Well-
What I'm asking for is, will the town get a legal opinion on this?
that's the plan. You know, the problem is that a lot of these seawalls were built when they were above the natural ordinary high water mark. Many of these seawalls are now below the natural ordinary high water mark. And that creates a real problem. Whose jurisdiction is it? But the last
jurisdiction.
2.5 months, we've had 5 seawalls built without any permits from us, from the DNR, or the Army Corps of Engineers. So the
But
question
my
is,
question is about
who's,
ownership, not jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Ownership.
well, yeah, that's good. I mean, it'd be like building a structure in a national park or state park. So that's state park. So that's a question we need to get an answer to. Other comments?
Jim Dean,
Jim, if you could go over here.
I just have really a question as well as a statement. So, based on what was just asked, who was expressly given this board any permission to make rules, regulations, try to enforce what is basically
state rights.
Yep.
This is now, if I understand this correctly, the Supreme Court of Indiana said this is for all the people of Indiana. Typically, the DNR, and particularly in other states, has worked closely with municipalities to try to determine what's in the best interest for, in this case, homeowners, because we are kind of singular in that regard. You know, there's very few homes actually sitting on the lake, except here on Long Beach. But in addition to that, it's not really a state park. It could be state land.
It is state land.
Okay. But we should, before you start making any rules and regs, you need to get express consent from the state to do that.
We're going to talk to our attorney and find out about that. And that's exactly.
Get that done before making any rules.
We haven't made any rules yet, Jim. That's what we're here for. Okay? Yeah.
Could I just suggest, just for possible ease of this evening and just kind of the orderly, I guess, arrangement of thoughts and ideas, we received a number of comments, and I've read through all of them and gotten a lot directly as well, compiled them here. I guess I agree with the opinion, wanted to make sure that it's heard by others so that they can hear. We will make it available online and in the office. But I guess for me, it'd be helpful to understand, are there any other comments that haven't been expressed or people who haven't made a point yet? Because I think there's a lot of the feedback, at least that I've read, that I also have similar questions and concerns and would like to get to some of that discussion as well. Because there will be another opportunity at the next APC meeting for another hearing. So we'll take this, potentially make additional revisions, and then publish that ahead of time to then allow for additional public comment at the next APC meeting. So to me, perhaps rather than going, each section, perhaps offering the opportunity for any general comments that haven't been expressed, and then open it up for conversation. Because I have comments on specific areas, but I also have just general feedback as well.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all seen those. Basically, I'm looking for comments that haven't been expressed already. So that's what the idea is, because we've seen everything and it will all be published. But I think people are going to have comments about certain sections, and I kind of like to, and we've only got 3 sections, so it should be pretty quick. So any other comments on that section? Okay, next section is, notwithstanding the foregoing provisions, stairs over dunes on properties without seawalls are permissible, as these stairs tend to protect the natural dunes that protect lakeshore properties. The intrusion of these stairs onto the public trust should be minimized. All construction of this type of stairs shall be subject to all federal, state, and local requirements, including the town's topography and other similar related and applicable ordinances. The rationale for this section is that we have properties, and I can think of particularly one between stops 22 and 21, where they have a big shelf and they have no seawall. And these folks, I believe it was their children, I don't know, that the kids go down to the beach, they go over this shelf and they've actually destroyed the dune because it looks like Mount Baldy. People keep running down Mount Baldy, the sand keeps trickling down onto the beach, and before long you don't have a dune. The idea of this ordinance was to allow these people to build the stairs down onto the beach so that they wouldn't have to, or wouldn't let their kids hopefully run down that shelf and destroy that dune. The dunes are the best protection we have for our lakeshore properties, particularly to the west in Long Beach. We don't need seawalls as you move west. But if we keep destroying the dunes, we will need seawalls moving to the west. The idea is to let that mirum grass grow. That's the best protection we have for those properties, and hopefully minimize the destruction of the dunes. So that was the rationale for this. I realize that, yes, we're let them build stairs down, and yeah, those stairs might get smashed up. That's a possibility. But my feeling was it was a good compromise to help protect the dunes, which, again, are our best protection. Comments? Okay. D. In view of the critical role that natural dunes play in the protection of the town's Lake Michigan shoreline, any non-permitted alteration of topography or sand moving beyond what is allowed in this ordinance will require, at the violating person's or entity's expense, restoration to the pre-violation condition, including restoration of vegetation. Additionally, any person or entity that violates this provision shall incur a $250 fine. This fine will accumulate daily at the same amount until full restoration, including but not limited to replanting of vegetation, is complete and determined and required by the town shall be in addition to other applicable fees or penalties for violations of other sections of the town code. In other words, it's going to cost people who destroy their dune $250 a day until they restore it. Again, these dunes are the best protection we have for those properties, particularly on the western edge of Long Beach, on the western shore of Long Beach. And basically in our coastal protection ordinance, we basically set a fine, and I believe it's like $1,200 if you destroy the dune. Well, since that ordinance was enacted, we've had 5 different lots that have destroyed their dune. The fine isn't enough to stop this wanton destruction of our dunes, which again are the best protection we have. If these dunes continue to get destroyed, we're going to have seawalls from one end of Long Beach to the other. The idea is to try and minimize that. Now, one of the parts that isn't in here and that we need to consider is we talk about the topography ordinance, and we didn't allow people to alter the dune. I've had some second thoughts about that, and I'll share those tonight. And with the attorney, when we redo this, we particularly felt that people didn't need to clear their weep holes. I was told by a number of people that weep holes and seawalls didn't need to be cleared because that water percolates through the sand. Well, since then I've talked to the street department, the head of the street department, Tom Dolph, and he tells me, yeah, actually we do have a problem. If we don't clear those weep holes, some of the lots in Long Beach, particularly at 16, 17, and 23, and maybe even the one further to the west, to the east, has problems. Those lots get soggy if those weep holes aren't cleared and we have a storm. With that in mind, we may need to come up with some sort of language to allow people to clear the weep holes, but hopefully if dunes are developing beyond those seawalls, we aren't going to destroy those. So we want to try and come up with some language to allow that to happen. In addition to that, I've talked with Joy Schmidt, who's in charge of the sewer project, and basically asked her whether or not it would be possible for us to do some limited storm sewer part of the project. In other words, we run storm sewers in addition to the sanitary sewers. And yes, that would be possible. So we're going to think about trying to do that at those particular areas. I don't think we're going to put storm sewers all along Lakeshore Drive because they're not needed there. But at those places where they are needed, we'll see if we can alleviate some of the homeowners' concerns. I guess some people are getting water in their basement. Other people's lots are becoming quite spongy after a storm. So those are kind of the ideas that I have on that. Comments? No. Yeah.
You have some, I guess for lack of a better word, I don't know if they're called storm sewers or not, but they're never cleaned out. So after this last rain, there was 2 foot of standing water.
Yep. Yeah.
And then that comes across and people have issues.
Right, and the idea would, those are, like French drains, and they either just drain into a big pit or they drain down onto the beach. That's not ideal. So what we're talking about is actual real storm sewers that would drain to the west to Michigan City. And they said, yes, that would be a possibility. So that's what we're looking at doing. We're going to tear up Lakeshore Drive anyway. It'd be a perfect time to try and install that. And by the way, the way the storm sewer or the sanitary sewer thing is set up is, the people who use it will pay for it. The storm sewer will be a different deal. The part of that project involving storm sewers, which would be done after the sanitary but before we repave, that would be the cost for that would go to the street department. So, Lakeshore Drive homeowners aren't going to have to pay for it any more than I have to pay for cleaning of my street or whatever else. So that's the idea for that. Any other comments?
What is considered a dune? Obviously it's from the seawall.
Excuse me, can you do your name and address?
Yes, 10 Fairley, 1802 Lakeshore. The seawall to the lake obviously could be a dune. Is it Lakeshore Drive to the lake?
What the dune is basically a pile of sand that's basically caused by the wind.
Right.
That's the way our dunes form here.
Okay. Well, I know you're all aware Mr. Bibles was at the bus stop next to my home with Kendra and Jeff Bartlett, and everybody saw and witnessed and watched the 3 backhoes take all the foliage off of the bus stop and cart it away. And now it's a pile of sand, which most of it has run downhill, some of it into my house, but there's really no provision I can see to stop that erosion or preserve that dune. And I'm sure you guys aren't paying a daily fine to yourselves for doing what has been done. So, and I know there's great plans in place, most of which I'm not aware of, but that's another issue. But if we're all about dune preservation, take a look at Stop 18, because I don't see any evidence of anything being preserved over there as far as dune preservation.
I'll take a look at it. Other comments?
John Mendel, 1508. So I'd like this provision qualified a bit. You said any removal of dune grass and so forth. So for example, from the back of my house to the beach, is it now incumbent upon me to allow that to just grow shut and never walk through there again? I'm not quite sure I understand.
Yeah, you know, this is an issue in Michigan City also, you know, because they're further to the west of us. And they actually have an initiative there, and this is something we need to look at. But the initiative they have there, and that's in Sheridan Beach along their esplanade, and basically what they're trying to do is encourage their homeowners to share these, I think they call them social paths, these paths to the beach from the homes. And so instead of having every home having a path going from the home to the beach, they'd like to see homeowners, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 homeowners get together and do one path and all use one path. And the reason
that's a big long stretch from their houses, and this is just, you know.
Right, but that makes it even more critical because we don't have, our dune's not, you know, is more endangered than theirs. They've got a big dune. Our dunes are way more endangered than theirs are because they're so small. You know, it doesn't take much to wreck a little dune. So that's the idea of that. So
the dunes in my area are continuing to build, actually.
And that would be great.
And the path that's been there for the last 100 years, that's how old the house is, 100 years old,
yeah.
Has not deterred the building of the dune. In fact, the dune in front of our house is now at the point you can't see the beach,
yeah.
And soon you won't be able to see the water. So it's what this provision is indicating to me is that I'm going to have to go out and walk down to a bus stop to access the beach. Is that the intention?
Well,
yes or no?
That would be ideal, but that's not necessarily the intention. The intention is to try and preserve the dune. We're going to figure out how to make that work.
Oh, okay, but you understand what I'm saying? Because right now, you would say, geez, you walk over that dune grass, and you're maintaining that path just by walking through it.
Then that's
consequently you're going to fine me what, $250 a day?
For walking across the dune? No, you know, we would like you not to walk across the dune and destroy the dune.
Backyard.
We'd like you to do all you can to preserve that dune, whether it's in your yard or whether it's, you know, it's like, I don't know whose property it is, you know. I mean, people talk about 150 feet, they talk about natural, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade.
Well, certainly.
But we would like people to try and preserve it.
This is above anything we would argue about as far as my water.
But what's that?
It's certainly above any point that we might choose to discuss as a high water mark.
Right.
So clearly, we can all agree that that is private property.
I think it's
you've raised a good issue, and one that we're struggling with, and that has to do with somebody who has a path and uses a path to and from the beach versus someone who takes a bulldozer and scrapes it from their property line, from their base of their seawall, in effect, all the way to the beach and pushes stuff into the water, vegetation, everything. Where do we meet in there? That's what I'm struggling with.
I'm struggling with this too, because it sounds like if I walk this path, I'm going to continue to prevent dune grass from filling it in. Ergo, I must be guilty of destroying the natural.
No, walking across it, you know, we would like you to try and if you could walk in one place and if you could share that path with your neighbors, that would really be ideal. You know, we hear a lot about people wanting to clear the sand from their yards because it blows back up. Well, one of the reasons that sand blows back up is because that natural dune, that mirum grass, has been killed. The mirum grass holds the sand in place, but if you walk across it, you know, your path is exposed, the wind's going to move it back. If you plow it down, it's really going to blow it back, and of course, those people are going to get sand up against their house. That's, you know, we'd like everybody to be good stewards of the environment, you know. That's what we're trying to encourage. Other comments?
Bob Boyce, South 29. I think what we're looking at here is two separate things. Now, if you get down towards John Mengel's house, and that there is dune, but somewhere as you go east, there is no dune. And what you've got now is you have cliffs, no seawalls, and you're getting a lot of erosion. I can, just my own property, I have 2 different lots. Now, we didn't even have a storm. We only had high water. And it's an artificially high water mark now that's being created because of the tour ships and that they want to bring in. But that's a whole different subject. But I can take you over there tomorrow if you want to look at it. The land I have on my lots is that high above the high water mark. It's carved out about 20 foot of that for about 60 feet wide. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, whatever you think about dune grass, that was not going to stop what happened. Okay? Now, then my next door neighbor has boulders. The boulders create the problem. Because when the water comes in from Michigan, it turbulates and it carves out. Same thing happens to stop 24. If you look at the boulders in the east, there's no beach at stop 24. So that's not a good option. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think you're dealing with 2 separate problems. Half of Long Beach has dune that you're trying to, you know, to say. The other half of Long Beach has no dune, and you're going to lose property. So, you know, I don't know how you want to handle either one of them, but if you want to come over and look at what's happening by me, you're welcome to do it. You might get a better handle on what's happening.
Great.
Thank you.
Other comments? Any comments from the commission? Nope.
Ready for that? On this section
Or any section. This is time for commission comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been helpful if Chris were here tonight, because some of the things I have might be for him, but we can take those back. I know. First of all, thanks to everyone for the comments that they submitted. Again, I read every one, and I found some of them actually to be pretty informative. Thank you to Rich for walking up and down the shoreline and trying to document what is there, because I think in the last session we had somebody ask the question, well, how many, if we're talking about stairs past seawalls, how many structures are we talking about, let alone how many are we talking about that extends into the public trust? And I don't know that we had a firm number of what that was, but just generally speaking, when I look at a lot of the pictures that are here, I would say the majority of these seem pretty reasonable with how they have their access to the lakefront. There are some that have occurred that those are the problem child ones, and it doesn't. I don't know that it applies to everything blanket. But that being said, I mean, you know, I take a step back and think about what are we trying to accomplish with the changes to this ordinance, because the original ordinance itself was designed to try to provide some guidance around when and how and where a protective structure could be placed. And we try to allow provisions to say, we recognize that you have the right to protect your property. We just don't want you arbitrarily defaulting to a hard structure seawall. You have to demonstrate that that's what you need. And we've got a lot of feedback and input to get to that point. And there's many states that have, you know, legislation, or rather local ordinances, or in some cases legislation actually, that look at trying to preserve the dune, trying to protect the shoreline. So I guess when I read the comments and when I try to gather what it is we have discussed previously, I think it's fair in saying that, you know, we want to protect the shoreline. How we get there, there's some different thoughts here, and I actually agree with Mr. Boyce that there's a couple of different issues that we're trying to tackle here all in one. But I would say first and foremost, I agree. We don't want to just allow for straight plowing of dunes, or straight plowing just of mass quantities of the dune or any of the vegetation if it's not necessary. So, and that's different from grooming. There were some comments in there about, well, you allow for grooming. Grooming is, you know, kind of cleaning up debris. That's kind of like raking. We're talking about just straight plowing. I don't think we want to see that. And I think there was a comment about weeping, where, you know, if there are weep holes or stormwater that comes through, I agree, it should allow for that so it doesn't cause damage to the structure of someone's home. But again, just pushing all of it out, I don't know. But even in that case, if the DNR grants a permit and it's in that area, I mean, we have limited say at that point. But
yeah, well, and the DNR actually does feel that they have jurisdiction. They actually had a hearing earlier this summer, maybe this spring, about proposed stairs. So they did feel they had jurisdiction. The problem we have is 5 stairs have been built since that hearing without any permits from anybody.
The second sort of goal, I would think we don't want to block access. Again, when I say block access, I'm talking at this moment about the shoreline itself. There are some cases where, like you said, that Dr. LeMay, where stairs were put past the seawall well into the public trust area, which prevents anyone, whether you live on the lake or not, from traversing, particularly when the water's high. And so while it's in limited quantity now, I mean, there's still the opportunity for more homes that could do that. And so do we come up with something to try to regulate that? But I would think we're trying to limit any sort of blockage. I think, again, we want to prepare the dunes, or preserve the dunes as much as possible in whatever case we can. But if those are the goals, I'm just going to rattle off quickly sort of the questions in my mind, which I'm struggling with how to propose a wording that addresses some of these things. But first, again, and I think we talked about this at the last meeting, I don't know that we can provide any ordinance that permits anything that the town provides permission for or denial of if it goes into the public trust area. So even if it's a retractable ladder, even if it's stairs, even if I don't know that we can legally permit that. Where my understanding is, where we can regulate is where it sort of connects, which is that, you know, there is eventually a line where we have jurisdiction, so we can prevent, you know, something from being connected. But anything that goes past, even if it's something like a pen that goes past into the public trust, we can't regulate that. And so some of this, you know, does that. So whether it's you know, I know we put in there sort of as just for conversation, a 3-foot ladder, trying to come right, we just put something in there. Even something like that, we couldn't have in there. You know, we have an existing topography ordinance, and what I'm trying to figure out is how largely different is this from that, the topography ordinance, which talks about what you can and can't do with sand, meaning there's penalties in place already for some of the activity that we're trying to prevent. Let's see, how do we know what was permitted or not permitted? I don't know. I don't. That's just a general question. When we talk about, certainly we know within recent years what maybe hasn't been permitted, but how do we know previously what was permitted or not permitted?
I'm not sure how good the building department records are before the last 4 years, frankly.
Yeah. And then denying access. You know, Attorney Knight brought up this notion in here, which again I'd love to get Chris's input on, because I didn't understand it the same way. But you know, it talks about access around, you know, people have rights to be able to put a pier out into the water, and I didn't quite gather that had that same interpretation anyway. But I'd like to get Chris's input on that. There were some comments, I think, that the Long Beach Community Alliance made about how our stairs better than a path, right? We talk about restricting clearing a path, like in Mr. Mengel's case, where he's providing a carve out, so to speak, or just a clearing, removal of grass, so there's a narrow path to walk down. How is that better or worse than if we say we would allow some sort of a boardwalk or stairs over across? So I'm just sort of trying to articulate areas, questions in my head, sort of where I struggle at this point in time, and the fact that the town has stairs that it maintains, and if they become in disrepair, that we can maintain. And so there's just a couple things, not a couple, but all the things that I just mentioned that are certain questions in my head. I don't know if others have similar thoughts or similar questions, but I think we still have some work to do here.
Any other questions?
When we talk about the topography ordinance, the topography ordinance does not have anything to do with paths to the lake, does not have anything to do with vegetation to the lake. What it has to do with changing the topography, the level, the contour of the terrain, anywhere in the town, and says that everything must be permitted. So, with your question, Mr. Mangel, about are you going to get fined for walking to the lake? No, we don't have anything. There's nothing in there now that does that. I don't see doing that. Mr. Perry said, what's the dune? The primary thing that we're dealing with is called the foredune. That's the first dune from the water that you come up against from the water. That's the primary foredune. That's the thing that protects anything behind it. If that disappears, then the fort basically doesn't disappear, it just moves farther and farther up. So once again, our struggle is, what I'm struggling with is, how do we write this so that it's clear that you just can't scalp the land, push it into the lake, and deal with it. To me, that's a violation of the topography ordinance, very clear. But somebody walking from A to B down to the lake, that's not a problem. People who have stairs that exist that terminate before it gets to the ordinary high water mark, we don't have any control over that, other than it should be permitted because it's a construction. The area we're concerned about is at the foredune, just as it enters the public trust area. That's the area we're struggling with. When I look through the pictures that Mr. Jersich has identified here, most of the issues are really stairs that exist well behind the foredune. In other words, they're not into the public trust area. And some of the people who raised issues last month about having stairs that have existed for 30 years. Well, we're not going to do anything with that, as far as I'm concerned, unless somehow it goes into the public trust. And when we talk about the public trust, we have got to get the DNR to participate in this process. I agree that we can't authorize something going into the public trust. They're the ones who regulate it. I think last month, at the last meeting we had, that day, the DNR had had basically, from their perspective, dropped the 581.5 and initiated the Supreme Court decision of what the ordinary high water mark is. We've had, how many hearings have we had on things? We've had at least 3 hearings in front of the DNR. They have not answered one of them.
Yep. Not
answered any one of them, which leaves us in limbo as to what we can do. My particular thing is I'd like to work with them. I believe every community, not just Long Beach, but every community, the Supreme Court decision covers all 70 miles or whatever it is, 40 miles of Indiana Lakeshore. Gary, Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, everybody, Michigan City, everybody has different needs as far as I can tell. And we need to be able to get with the DNR to have some joint method of administering this process. In the past, and on other issues, in the past the DNR has basically just gone carte blanche and did what they wanted to do without discussing it with the individual communities. Now, I'm not going to say that's true in every case, but it's true in a substantial number of cases. And I know it's true with a couple of cases that occurred here in Long Beach. So it behooves us to get with the DNR to force them to make a decision as to how they're going to handle this joint administration if they will allow it. They may very well say, you guys, we don't want you to tell us anything. We're going to deal with it. But they have not stepped up to the plate at this point in time and said, this is what we're going to do. Every instance that we have gone and addressed to them about issues at the lake, they have basically, I think we've got one hearing that's almost a year old, if not older, and they have refused to address it. So tomorrow, we will make one more attempt to get with the DNR to get them to participate in this process, because they're the key, they're the ones who administer it. And that's all I can say. So that's what I'm struggling with.
Rich?
I walk the beach from 14 to 31. I walk the beach often, live across the street from the beach, and there are way too many issues that have been brought up that we need to step aside and take a pass on this ordinance and do some other work with the DNR, the Army Corps, and then come back and work, because in my opinion, I looked at almost all of them. Wet, cold, and there's some areas you can barely get to. I got to them. And I don't see what this issue is right now. Our issue is with the DNR and the Army Corps before we can move forward. We have an option to not move forward with this ordinance. And that's... We're all in this together, whether you believe it or not. No, I haven't heard that. I've only been here 5 years, and I have not heard that one time. But I've been talking to a lot of people on the lake, off the lake, and there's way more people that are together within Long Beach than the small percentage that want to divide, like our country. We have to do a much better job working together. I don't want to be up here making ordinances. I want to work with you and everybody here to do what's best for Long Beach. I don't understand what's going on here. We're trying to help. That's what I feel. I just try to do what's right for everybody.
Any other comments from the commission?
Well said.
Okay. In a moment, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn, but if you could just stick around for a second, I've got just a couple announcements, but they're not part of this. So just, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. It'll take 2 seconds. So do I hear a motion to adjourn? So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Well, discussion. Great.
Oh, discussion.
What are the next steps here?
Oh, I'm sorry. The next step is to take back all the comments, meet with the attorney, and come up with decide which parts of this ordinance stay, which parts get amended, which parts go, and they will be published. After we come up with a draft ordinance, Chris promised me that we should be, if we meet with him, we should have that done. Hopefully we can get that done a few days before the next APC meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight. I can't guarantee when he's going to get it done because we have to get together with him and come up with it.
We did. I mean, we made a commitment.
Did we? What was the commitment?
So we had said, so this is the workshop here, October 14th, the APC would publish or distribute it via town email, the updated draft of the ordinance to the public. And then October 21st is our next APC meeting. At that point, then we would have another public comment.
So it gives us a week. Okay, well then if we said that's what we're going to do, that's what we're going to do. So we'll have to get that meeting set up. Okay, so motion, carry, all.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
I'm Tim Perry again, 1902. Why the rush? You made all the sense in the world. I thought
Well,
everything was perfect, and now we're going to
we
rush.
made a commitment, I guess. That's what I'm hearing. Unless we want to change that.
For what reason? I mean,
Well, that's what was said at the last meeting. I wasn't here, but that's what was said at the last meeting.
At the next
But at the next meeting, we can also, they can make recommendations that we can vote on.
Yeah, nothing's going to get passed at the
Or
next
not
meeting.
vote.
Correct.
Should I say something?
So please read the next
My
meeting.
voice, South 29.
Okay.
I noticed something on Lakeshore Drive, and I was gonna ask a question to all of you. What is the difference between destroying the bottom of a dune and the top of a dune? There is none, is there? Because when they excavate to put homes on the hillside, they take out thousands of yards of sand. They haul it off-site. That could be used to nurture Stop 24. It could be used to nurture the beaches. I don't think it's a real wise move for the town to allow these companies that are excavating for these homes to cut the top off the dune and then haul the sand off-site and sell it someplace else.
Something to consider. I don't know how we would get it down to the beach, and one problem with...
They can haul it down there. You can make it part of their...
Well,
Except they're going to dig a foundation, this is where you put the sand.
Well, except to get it to the beach, you gotta get it to the beach. That would be the problem.
Well,
But,
Stop 24 would be a problem.
Yeah,
you dump it over there.
Back up to Stop 24 and Dallas is done.
Yeah, anyway, that's, yeah, but
I mean,
it's a good point. We'll think about
look
it.
into.
It's
Okay.
worth further discussion.
Yeah, further discussion. All right.
Dr. Levesque, Mary Lou McFadden, Duffy Lane. Do we have a copy of that picture that Rich took of the...
Yeah, it's multiple pictures. He had taken the time over the weekend to do that and sent them, and I wanted to get them to the commission members. So I mean, there's limited copies. Anyone's free to take any of these that are here. It's also a set of the comments that people submitted, but both of these will have up on the website tomorrow.
Okay. Any other comments? So there's a motion made to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.